In November 2023, a video began to circulate of Nini, the chief of security to El Chapo's sons and a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel, being taken into custody. In the wake of the arrest, an inside source revealed that El Chapo's sons had turned their back on Nini. Why did Los Chapitos turn their back on a once trusted soldier, and did they have a hand in his arrest? In this video, I will be pulling back the curtains on the relationship between Nini, Los Chapitos, and the DEA. An act of betrayal. On the 22nd of November, 2023, the streets of Culiacan, Sinaloa were thrown into chaos. On the rooftop of a two-story house, a man in his underwear was seen trying to escape the authorities. This man was none other than Nestor Isidro Perez, better known as Nini, the alleged head of security for Los Chapitos, the sons of the infamous drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. As Nini attempted to flee, a voice was heard yelling, "Ya entregate Nini," which translates to "turn yourself over, Nini." When Nini did not make any attempts to do so, the Mexican military allegedly fired 2 warning gunshots. As the shots rang through the air, Nini quickly realized that he was trapped and there was nowhere to run to. The dramatic arrest was captured on video and shared widely on social media. The operation to capture Nini began almost simultaneously with the second arrest of Ovidio Guzman, known as El Raton, the youngest of Los Chapitos. According to sources inside the Mexican military, they received intelligence about Nini's whereabouts from intercepted communications. In a previous attempt to capture him, Nini managed to escape by grabbing a motorcycle from one of his lookouts and fleeing the scene while wearing a helmet. The Mexican military mistakenly arrested the lookout, thinking they had captured Nini, but this time there was no escape. Some sources within a U.S. federal agency close to the operation believe that Nini was betrayed by his own people. For some time, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman and Alfredo Guzman, 2 of El Chapo's sons still at large in Mexico, wanted to remove their support for Nini due to the unwanted attention he was bringing to the organization. A member of the Guzman family, who spoke on the issue, provided a different view. According to this source, Nini wanted to be left alone. During a reunion about 3 weeks before his arrest, a heated argument broke out between Nini and another henchman known as El P. Ivan Guzman warned them to resolve their issues or face the consequences. Despite the warnings, Nini returned to one of his ranches, where the government nearly captured him. He managed to escape, but the authorities seized his exotic pets and luxury cars. Furious, Nini blamed LPE for the near capture and was angry at Ivan for not allowing him to act as he wished. Ignoring further warnings, Nini returned to one of his houses in Culiacan, believing he was safe. However, the Mexican military had other plans. On the 21st of November, a private communication chat among Los Chapitos henchmen warned of the presence of Fuerzas Elite, the Mexican military special operations forces, who were there to capture Nini. The operation happened swiftly. Despite having enough backup, Los Chapitos decided not to engage in a shootout to avoid harming the community, following orders from Ivan and Alfredo Guzman. The arrest of Nini was a significant victory for law enforcement, but the operation was far from over. Given his high-profile status and the potential for a rescue attempt by his cartel associates, the authorities decided to transfer him to the maximum security Altiplano prison by helicopter. This same prison had held El Chapo, the infamous leader of the Sinaloa cartel, nearly 10 years ago. The helicopter departed from the North Prison, carrying Nini and several heavily armed guards. The flight to Altiplano was tense, with everyone on high alert for any signs of trouble. However, the transfer was completed without incident, and Nini was safely delivered to the prison. Altiplano Prison, officially known as the Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, is located in Almoloya de Juarez, on the outskirts of Mexico City. This high-security prison is designed to be a fortress, housing some of the most dangerous criminals in Mexico. The prison's architecture and security measures are carefully planned to prevent any possibility of escape. One of the first layers of security is the prison's remote location. Surrounded by a wide stretch of barren land, Altiplano is isolated from urban areas, making any escape attempt a difficult task. The prison is surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire, and guard towers are properly placed to provide a 360-degree view of the perimeter. To further ensure security, the airspace around Altiplano Prison is designated as a no-fly zone. This measure prevents any aerial escape attempts, such as helicopter rescues, which have been used in other high-profile prison breaks around the world. The no-fly zone ensures that no unauthorized aircraft can approach the prison. In addition to the no-fly zone, the entirety of Altiplano Prison is covered in CCTV cameras. These cameras are carefully placed to monitor every corner and corridor of the facility. The CCTV footage is monitored by a dedicated team of security personnel who are trained to spot any signs of trouble. Despite the fortress-like security of Altiplano Prison, on the night of July 11, 2015, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman executed one of the most shocking prison escapes in history. The escape began with El Chapo entering the shower area of his cell, a seemingly routine activity that would soon turn into an extraordinary event. Security cameras recorded El Chapo entering the shower stall, the only part of the cell where inmates can have a small amount of privacy. However, this privacy was precisely what El Chapo needed to initiate his escape plan. From within the shower stall, he accessed a hidden entrance that led to a tunnel. Without the knowledge of prison officials, El Chapo climbed down a 32-foot-tall ladder into a recently constructed tunnel. This tunnel was not a simple, hastily dug passage. It was well planned and constructed over several months. The tunnel was over a mile long and had ventilation systems to ensure a steady supply of fresh air. It was also well lit, with electric lights installed along its length, making it easy to navigate. The tunnel also had a motorcycle on standby. This motorcycle was used to transport El Chapo quickly through the tunnel, reducing the time it would take to cover the mile-long distance. The tunnel ended at a house under construction outside the prison walls. This house served as the exit point for El Chapo, allowing him to emerge far from the watchful eyes of the prison guards. In the aftermath of the incident, Mexico's Attorney General Arely Gomez Gonzalez inspected the tunnel entrance and confirmed that the escape was a well-planned operation that involved resources and inside help. The nature of the tunnel's construction and the level of detail suggested that El Chapo and members of the Sinaloa cartel had bought off prison officials and possibly even members of the Mexican government. El Chapo's escape from Altiplano prison proved that even the most intensely guarded prison in the country was not immune to the influence of the drug cartels. This is why when news of El Nini's arrest and imprisonment at Altiplano began to spread, many were expecting the Sinaloa cartel to once again rise to the occasion and start plotting to free him, but this was not the case. There was also no act of revenge carried out by the cartel, making it clear that Los Chapitos and other high-ranking members of the Sinaloa cartel had no intention to help El Nini out of his predicament. While it is not public knowledge whether or not Los Chapitos sent out a video of El Nini to the DEA, their lack of action goes to show that they may have had a hand in his capture. This is truly shocking, considering El Nini's role in the Sinaloa cartel and the relationship that existed between him and El Chapo's sons. How did El Nini become the chief of Los Chapitos security? An evil alliance. In the Sinaloa cartel, one name strikes fear into the hearts of many: Nestor Isidro Perez Salasas, better known as El Nini. Born and raised in the violent streets of Sinaloa, El Nini quickly rose through the ranks to become one of the cartel's most feared enforcers. El Nini's rise to power was marked by his ruthless efficiency and undying loyalty to the cartel's leadership. His reputation for brutality caught the attention of Los Chapitos, the sons of the infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. These young heirs to the Sinaloa empire saw in El Nini a valuable asset, someone who could enforce their will with an iron fist. Following Chapo's arrest, Los Chapitos, comprising Ovidio Guzman Lopez, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, and Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, were determined to maintain their father's legacy. They needed enforcers who were not only loyal, but also capable of instilling fear in their enemies. El Nini fit this role perfectly. El Nini commanded a security team known as the Ninis, a group of particularly violent enforcers dedicated to protecting the Chapitos and their interests. The nickname Nini is derived from Mexican slang, referring to young people who neither work nor study. But make no mistake, El Nini and his men were far from idle. They were the cartel's executioners, responsible for carrying out the most brutal orders. Under El Nini's leadership, the Ninis became infamous for their extreme methods of torture and execution. One of the most horrifying methods used by El Nini involved the use of corkscrews. Victims were restrained, and the corkscrew was inserted into their muscles. The enforcers would then twist and rip the corkscrew out, causing unimaginable pain and muscle damage. This cruel act was often followed by the application of hot chilies to the open wounds. The use of hot chilies was particularly cruel. The burning sensation from the chilies, combined with the open wounds, created a level of pain that was almost unbearable. In 2017, 2 Mexican federal law enforcement officers fell into the hands of El Nini and his men. For 2 hours, the officers endured unimaginable suffering as the Ninis tortured them with corkscrews and hot chilies. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, one of Los Chapitos, personally oversaw the torture of these officers. After extracting the information they needed, Ivan ended the suffering of one of the officers with a bullet. The bodies were then dumped near a motel off a highway. As time passed, the Navalado Ranch, owned by Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, became infamous as a site of torture and execution. Rival drug traffickers, law enforcement officers, and even members of other cartel factions were brought here to be interrogated. Once the Chapitos extracted the information they needed, needed, the captives were killed. Some were shot, while others met a more gruesome fate. They were fed dead or alive to the tigers kept by El Nini and Los Chapitos. By using such extreme measures, El Nini and Los Chapitos ensured that their enemies were too terrified to resist. The message was clear. Anyone who did not do what they wanted would be met with unimaginable suffering. At the peak of his criminal career, El Nini and his team of enforcers left a trail of blood and fear across Mexico. One incident that cemented El Nini's position of power in the Sinaloa cartel was his role in Culiacanazo, otherwise known as Black Thursday. It was a seemingly ordinary afternoon in the Tres Rios neighborhood of Culiacan, Sinaloa, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. At 3 p.m. local time, a convoy of 35 police officers and soldiers approached a modest house. Their mission: to capture Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son of the notorious drug lord El Chapo. Initial government reports claimed that the convoy was on a routine patrol when they were fired upon. However, it was later revealed that this was a pre-planned military operation executed in response to a U.S. extradition request. The element of surprise was important, but as the officers closed in, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Inside the house, Ovidio Guzman Lopez and 3 others were caught off guard. The security forces quickly moved in, securing the premises and taking Ovidio into custody. But outside, the real battle was just beginning. Word of Ovidio's capture spread like wildfire. Around 700 cartel gunmen, heavily armed and ready for combat, began to mobilize. They were equipped with .50 caliber rifles, rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and heavy machine guns. The cartel's response was brutal, and El Nini played a key role in assembling the resistance. As the clock ticked past 4 p.m., the situation in Culiacan had reached a boiling point. The cartel's counterattack, led by El Nini, was relentless. His men, well-equipped and highly organized, launched a series of pre-planned assaults that overwhelmed the security forces. El Nini's expertise was on full display. He directed his men to target key military and police positions, creating chaos and confusion. The cartel's firepower was unmatched, with .50 caliber rifles, rocket launchers, and heavy machine guns raining down destruction. The cartel's use of armored vehicles gave them a significant advantage. These makeshift tanks, equipped with bulletproof vests and heavy weaponry, allowed the gunmen to move through the streets without fear. The security forces were outgunned and overpowered at every turn. El Nini's leadership was important in maintaining the cartel's position. His ability to plan attacks and adapt to the ever-changing situation kept the security forces on the back foot. The government's plan to capture Ovidio was falling apart. In a shocking turn of events, 56 prisoners in the city's prison rioted, took weapons from guards, and escaped. This appeared to be a planned attack, further adding to the chaos in Culiacan. By this time, the city's security forces were stretched thin, struggling to contain the violence. Back in the command center, government officials were faced with an impossible decision. The violence was increasing, and the lives of civilians and security personnel were at risk. The situation was spiraling out of control, and the pressure to find a solution was mounting. Left with no other choice, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador made the controversial decision to release Ovidio Guzman. He argued that the capture of one drug smuggler could not be more valuable than the lives of innocent civilians. The decision was made to prevent further bloodshed and restore order. At approximately 6 p.m., Ovidio Guzman Lopez was released. The cartel's objective had been achieved, and the violence began to reduce. The streets of Culiacan, however, were left scarred by the day's events. In the aftermath of the failed mission, the government sent 8,000 troops and police reinforcements to restore peace in the city. The battle had left a lasting impact on the city of Culiacan, and it had earned El Nini a spot on the list of Sinaloa's most dangerous enforcers. Despite the failure of the first attempt to arrest Ovidio Guzman Lopez, Mexican authorities were determined to bring the drug lord to justice, and so a few years down the line, they returned to the drawing board and began a new mission. In the months leading up to January 5th, 2023, the day Ovidio Guzman would finally be taken into custody, Mexican authorities, with the support of United States officials, began to carefully plan the operation to capture him. The United States had even offered a reward of $5 million for information leading to his arrest. This high-stakes operation was not just about capturing a cartel leader, it was a move to weaken one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. When the day arrived, the operation began at dawn, with a well-planned assault on Ovidio's hideout. Helicopter gunships flew above the building, providing support as ground forces moved in. Ovidio Guzman Lopez, known as El Raton, was quickly extracted by helicopter and flown to Mexico City. He was was then taken to a maximum security federal prison. In similar fashion to what happened during the failed mission to arrest Ovidio in 2018, furious cartel members retaliated with a manner that shocked the world. They set up roadblocks, torched dozens of vehicles, and launched attacks on planes at the local airport. The streets of Culiacan were once again transformed into a war zone. The cartel's response was brutal and unending. 2 Mexican Air Force aircraft were forced to make emergency landings after being hit by gunfire. Helicopter gunships were deployed to support the ground operation, but the violence continued. In the chaos, 10 soldiers and 19 cartel members lost their lives. A further 35 military personnel were injured, and 21 gunmen were arrested. The impact on the local population was tragic. Residents were urged to stay indoors as the violence raged on. Justine Goldbass, a 32-year-old woman traveling with her family, recounted how their bus was forced to stop and hide for 16 hours to avoid the violence. There was a lot of fear. People were scared, she said. In a shocking turn of events, the fuselage of a plane scheduled to fly from Culiacan to Mexico City was hit by gunfire as it prepared for takeoff. As brutal as the cartel's response was, it did not change the fact that the government's goal had been achieved and Ovidio had been taken into custody. What the Sinaloa cartel didn't know at the time was that El Nini would be next. Hell in a cell. The Sinaloa cartel, once led by the notorious Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, has been responsible for flooding the United States with massive quantities of narcotics, including fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine. After El Chapo's capture and extradition to the United States, his sons took the reins, and in addition to being their head of security, El Nini also played an important role in their operations. From 2012 to 2021, El Nini was allegedly involved in the distribution and manufacture of cocaine and methamphetamine for importation into the United States. His reign of terror included the murder, torture, and kidnapping of rivals and witnesses. In the same year that he murdered 2 Mexican federal law enforcement officers, El Nini also tortured and killed 3 members of the rival Los Zetas cartel. The United States government, recognizing the threat posed by El Nini and the Sinaloa cartel, launched an extensive investigation. The DEA, FBI, and other law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a case against him. Finally, on May 25, 2024, months after his arrest, El Nini was extradited to the United States to face charges in 2 separate indictments. This extradition marks a significant achievement in the fight against the Sinaloa cartel and the deadly fentanyl epidemic that has claimed countless lives. Following the extradition of El Nini, President Joe Biden addressed the nation and hammered on the importance of this event and the collaborative efforts between the United States and Mexico. His speech also touched on the importance of international cooperation in the fight against drug trafficking and cartel violence. Still speaking on the development, Biden assured the nation that El Nini would pay for his crimes, saying, "El Nini played a prominent role in the notorious Sinaloa cartel, one of the deadliest drug trafficking enterprises in the world. The United States has charged him for his role in illicit fentanyl trafficking and for murdering, torturing, and kidnapping numerous rivals, witnesses, and others." President Biden also expressed his gratitude to Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and the Mexican government for their efforts in capturing and extraditing El Nini. He said, "Our governments will continue to work together to attack the fentanyl and synthetic drug epidemic that is killing so many people in our homelands and globally." Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid more than 50 times more potent than heroin, has become the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 49. The Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of the Chapitos and El Nini, has been a major supplier of this deadly drug to the United States. The extradition of El Nini sends a powerful message to other cartel leaders: no one is beyond the reach of justice. As El Nini awaits trial in the United States, the world watches closely. The former high-ranking enforcer faces a litany of charges, including cocaine and methamphetamine importation, firearms offenses, conspiracy to obstruct justice through murder, and multiple counts of kidnapping resulting in death. These charges carry severe penalties, including mandatory life sentences, reflecting the gravity of his crimes. Considering the evidence against him and the horrific nature of his crimes, it is likely that when El Nini stands trial for his crimes, he will be found guilty and will receive a lengthy sentence. It is also very likely that after taking into consideration the resources available to the Sinaloa cartel, the U.S. government will choose to have El Nini locked up in one of the most secure prisons, ADX Florence. ADX Florence, officially known as the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, is a place shrouded in mystery and fear. Located in the remote desert of Florence, Colorado, this supermax prison is designed to house the most dangerous and notorious criminals in the country. The facility is often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, and for good reason. Its design and conditions are properly crafted to ensure maximum security and isolation, creating an environment that many describe as a living nightmare. If El Nini is found guilty and sent to ADX Florence, he will be facing the same fate as El Chapo, who was perhaps a mentor of his. The experiences of the infamous Mexican drug lord provide a chilling example of what life is like inside ADX Florence. Sentenced to life plus 30 years, El Chapo's daily existence is now very different from the power and luxury he once enjoyed as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. His experience offers insight into the harsh realities of life inside Alcatraz of the Rockies. Like the cells of all other inmates in ADX Florence, El Chapo's cell is furnished with a concrete bed, desk, and chair, all bolted to the floor to prevent them from being moved or used as weapons. The minimalist design of the cells is intended to strip inmates of any sense of comfort. In addition to the concrete furniture, El Chapo's cell has a toilet and a shower, but even these basic amenities are controlled by the guards. The water is time-regulated to prevent flooding, and the electricity is cut off at specific times to ensure complete control over the inmate's environment. The tiny window in his cell measures just 42 inches tall and 4 inches wide, and it offers no view of the outside world. This design is intentional and is meant to prevent inmates from knowing their exact location within the prison. The psychological impact of this extreme isolation is truly shocking. Inmates often experience symptoms of depression, anxiety, and paranoia. The hours spent alone can also lead to a sense of hopelessness and depression. Former ADX warden Robert Hood once described the facility as not built for humanity. He believes that the conditions inside are worse than death, and he is not the only one that thinks so. The constant isolation and lack of human contact are designed to break the spirit of even the most resilient individuals, like El Nini. Inmates at ADX Florence spend 23 hours a day in their cells, with only 1 hour allotted for recreation. But even this hour is spent in a concrete pit that resembles an empty swimming pool. The pit is designed to prevent any view of the surrounding area, further isolating the inmates. During this hour, El Chapo is escorted by 3 guards and allowed to walk around the pit. However, the space is so small that he can only take 10 steps in a straight line or 31 steps in a circle. The recreation pit is another example of the prison's well-planned design to ensure complete control and isolation. The walls of the pit are high and plain. The purpose of this design is to create a sense of disconnection from the outside world. The daily routine at ADX Florence is unchanging. Inmates are subjected to constant surveillance, with cameras monitoring their every move. The guards maintain strict control over every aspect of their lives, from the timing of their meals to the regulation of their water and electricity. This level of control is intended to prevent any possibility of escape or rebellion, ensuring that the inmates remain completely obedient. For El Nini, the transition from the heights of power to life in ADX Florence will be a painful reminder of the consequences of a life of crime. As the clock continues ticking, El Nini's trial draws closer, and the world is watching to see how it unfolds. Los Chapitos and the Sinaloa cartel seem to have turned their backs on him, and so many are wondering if when the time comes, he will turn his back on them and reveal sensitive information to the authorities in hopes of getting a shorter sentence. Check out any of our other videos by clicking the cards on your screen.